So I want to talk just a little bit today about The Phenomenon of Life by Hans Jonas, and that was subtitled Toward a Philosophical Biology. And I think the reason I want to talk about Jonas is that he really well captures, from my perspective anyway, some of the evolving mediacies that occur in life, which I think in some way give a kind of an account for what I would call the expanding ranges of mediacy in life. And it's sort of like what Jonas is doing is he begins with inorganic matter and the self-same permanence that seems to be assured by the inorganic. And then from there, he looks at how life itself emerges with a kind of boundary, right, metabolism, and the vegetative and the metabolic, they begin with a kind of a very narrow horizon, but a horizon of mediacy of outwardness and inward differentiation. And this basic function, this basic capacity of increasing inward differentiation and increasing outwardness in transcendence and reach then gets magnified and magnified as we move up the phylogenetic scale. And so this is just I wanted to share a couple of lines. And some of this is, it is work that I've done a lot on over the years, and it is in my book, Sources of Significance, which should be out, I guess, in September. But these are some of the things that Jonas says here. He's sort of criticizing the idea that if what really mattered in life were mere assurance of permanence, if that were all the if how to say if assurance of permanence were all that mattered in the world, then life wouldn't have emerged because inorganic matter sort of already had that. And here's what Jonas writes. He says, the great contradictions that humans discover in themselves, freedom and necessity, autonomy and dependence, ego and world, connectedness and isolation, creativity and mortality, are present in life's more primitive forms, each of which maintains a perilous balance between being and non-being, and from the very beginning harbors within itself an inner horizon of transcendence. This theme, common to all life, can be traced in its development through the ascending order of the organic capabilities and functions: metabolism, motility and appetite, feeling and perception, imagination, art, thinking, a progressive scale of freedom and danger reaching its pinnacle in man, who can perhaps understand his uniqueness in a new way if he is no longer to regard himself in metaphysical isolation. And so I think Jonas, he really is, he's trying to accomplish, again, a sort of philosophical biology by looking at the very phenomenon of life and seeing these ranging mediacies of expanding inwardness and expanding scope in outwardness. Now, he already, mentioned that metabolic structure and a sort of cell membrane which separates off the integrity of what's inside from what's outside, and how that has a kind of mediation. Well, that spatial and temporal range, it gets larger and larger as we move from vegetative life into animal life. Now, animal life includes the ability to move and to feel for Jonas. For Jonas, moving and feeling are part of the same dynamic in that locomotion is a moving toward or away with a perceptual awareness of one's surrounding. Now, the plant certainly has some sort of contact with its environment, and the plant does have some kind of movement, but it's hard to think of making plants neurotic or of stressing plants out in the same way that we can stress out an animal. Certainly a plant can be stressed. It is reactive to its environment, but it doesn't flee from aggressors, and it doesn't have a capacity to worry about its impending capture. It can't have the frustration of a failed attempt at escape. So there is something about a growing range there. I think what Jonas is going to do as he moves into humans and humanity, one of the real unique characteristics of humanity is the interposition of an eidetic realm, that when we look at the world, we see it through a kind of eidos, and that eidetic realm is one of, for him, of image making, and that image making and freedom are two aspects of the same thing. When we want to get at what is it about humans that is an extended or an expanded range of mediacy, well, we have images, and those images can be the source of directionality and of action, and it's not simply a kind of reaction against world in terms of conditioning or something like this. I mean, here's sort of the way that Jonas cuts at this. He's talking about the unique human ability to draw and to have one's movements be guided by an image of how things should look. He says, what we have here is a trans-animal, uniquely human fact, eidetic control of motility, that is muscular action governed not by a set of stimulus-response patterns, but by a freely chosen, internally represented, purposefully projected form. The eidetic control of motility, with its freedom of external execution, complements the eidetic control of imagination with its freedom of internal drafting. And I think what he's, sort of suggesting in some way is that if we want to understand humanity, we can see that life itself seems to be, for whatever reason, it seems to be opening itself to greater and greater expanses of of awareness, of inwardness, of individuation, and of reach and scope. That humans have been freed up to those realms of imagination and of thought where we can contemplate the deepest aspects of our biology. We can learn about genetic code and genetic sequence. We can open up the cell plasm. We can learn about cosmology. We seem to have the farthest reach and scope in our modes of mediation. And I think for Jonas, this has a kind of significance. Now, we don't want to give an agency to life just in general, but I think there's another sense in which if we don't give some agency to life in its expanding forms of mediation, we're denying one of the realities about biology and about the order that we can see in it. Now, this is one of the things that he says. He says, it then seems to issue in this choice of monistic alternatives: either take the presence of purposive inwardness on the part of physical order, that is, in humans, as a valid testimony to the nature of that wider reality that lets it emerge, and to accept what reveals itself as part of the general evidence, or extend the prerogatives of mechanical matter to the very heart of a seemingly heterogeneous class of phenomena, and oust teleology from even the nature of the human, whence had it tainted the nature of the universe, that is, to alienate man from himself, and to deny the genuineness to the self-experience of life. I wish that I could say that those were my original sentences, but that is so much of the concern that I have when I'm trying to register my sympathies and my concerns for this question of teleology and purpose in human life. That somehow it seems as if life yearns for greater expanses of inwardness, of unique individuation, while reaching out toward greater recognition uh, of order and regularity in larger and larger scales of concern. And there does seem to be, at the very least, a kind of freedom to move toward images that we have of ourselves, and to both draw images that we have, but to grow ourselves in an image of ourselves. And some of this is a kind of, it seems like a freedom that's grounded in the very emergence of life itself. Okay, thank you.